welcome to my channel. Today I'm a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, we're going to continue to look at some episodes of Crash Course's Native American history. We're going to be continuing to look a little bit at the land stuff as well as, in this case, the law stuff. So let's get started here. So we're going to first one we're going to look at is episode 16, which is an introduction to federal Indian law. So we'll kind of do a quick look at. So first, it kind of this talks about how, well, it's a mess. It starts off with our host getting a giant box full of tangled up Christmas lights because federal Indian law is a mess. So technically they have sovereignty, but they're also part of the United States, and his example is there was a specific tribe, I can't remember, I watched these things kind of en masse just a few minutes ago, who wanted to compete in a lacrosse tournament in England. They created lacrosse. They're not England, the specific name tribe, but England wouldn't accept their passports, which were for their tribe. They did say, it's like, you can come this time, but then you have to get it figured out. So they said no, and they had to figure it out with the U.S. government, because technically they're sovereign, technically they're not. It's messy. Then he does go in and talk about how a lot of Native American women disappear. And this goes into how, depending on the tribe and the situation, laws are different. So the best example I can give is, again, my husband's an attorney for one of the native tribes here in Arizona, and they can handle certain minor stuff. But when it comes to larger stuff, particularly murder, it's in federal hands, or whenever, like, what would be considered federal cases. And the federal government can take it if they want it. Typically, some of them do, some of them don't. It varies. And when it comes to certain Native women who go missing, again, depending on the state or the federal government currently in that state and the law enforcement, whether or not they care at all. So it is a major issue. I believe it's also a major issue in Canada as well, where you have the First Nations. Same people, same groups, different names, different laws. I'm not Canadian. I'm not going there. So sorry about that. I do in fact have a cold, but I want to get some of this stuff done. We're still in December when I'm filming this, but nonetheless, it's a tangled mess. Eventually that lacrosse team did get to go to Ireland. But again, it's very much of a tangled mess, and some tribes aren't recognized, and they're fighting to be recognized. And if the tribes don't acknowledge how the set up their government as the U.S. wants, as in, let's do it our way. I believe we talked about this already. I can't remember. It was the last video. He covers this. In fact, sovereignty is a big thing throughout this entire series. But again, it gets very, very, very messy. The next video on this list, let me jump into here, is, move this, and it talks about urbanization.
Famous.
So This episode is episode 17. It's era of native urban relocation. So this isn't necessarily always talking about their forced relocation, because that happened. See the previous video where that happened, because in the 1950s they had to pay back the U.S. had to pay back its debt, and thought, that's a good idea, let's just assimilate the natives and make them go away. So they pushed them to move to cities, and they still do. There are Native Americans everywhere. The problem is, it does go back to you have to register with your tribe, and there's all sorts of rules involving, depending on the tribe, some of them involve blood quantum levels, which is how much of a Native American you are genetically. Yeah, it makes no sense. It really doesn't. But again, and it was something made up by the white people, but it's imposed by quite a few tribes. For some cases these days, it's done, particularly the ones like in my state who have the big casinos. They don't want to spread out that money, because the money they get a portion of it, all the members of the tribe. So I think my husband told me it's second or third generation. So I believe your grandparents have to be native. So I think it's a quarter for the tribe. So that's not a lot. All right. Some tribes are different. And it varies, but nonetheless, they had an issue because these natives were owed services, and they had to find them. And yes, people register as native on the census all the time when they're probably not native at all and have nothing to do with it. I know I heard stories. I think most people in the U.S., particularly white people, like to claim they have some sort of native ancestry. I don't know why. I know there was rumors in our family tree that, particularly on my mother's side, that there was some sort of native. I have no clue. As far as we can tell, there's no evidence of it. My late mother did do genealogy. I would do that, but I don't have time. So, but nonetheless, that's where a lot of some of the blood quantum levels and who's allowed to be registered. And they have to actually find them. They did it did talk about them banding together, certain different tribes coming together within the cities to be recognized and get services and work together. But then there's this controversy that by moving to the cities, they lose their culture. They lose their ancestry. So it's an interesting episode because there are natives who live in the cities. They're everywhere. But are they losing their culture because of it? And are banding together, does that help? Does that hinder? It's very confusing, and it's an argument between the native tribes. So that is that episode. The next episode, I believe, is 21. Episode 20. All right, for some reason. So this is talking about Native American history, modern tribal governments. So we went to how that started, and now we're doing it again. And there's still a lot of the problems are still there, because the law back from the 30s is still there. It hasn't changed. I mentioned this in the last video. The law happened in the mid 30s, and how you have to set things up, and and then it makes no sense. And there are a lot of natives who are fighting for recognition, and they're fighting for things like, I believe I don't know whether this is the episode where they talk about the pipeline. If people remember back where the natives were arguing with this oil pipeline that did end up being built, if there was a spill, it was going to affect their water supply. If there's a spill, it will affect their water supply. It's still there. They're still fighting. There's also And it's also fighting what type of powers they have to govern themselves. So what laws can they punish? As of right now, as far as I know, they cannot punish murder. They cannot, and this is part of the previous video we were talking about the missing women. Depending on the tribe, they cannot punish white people for crimes against natives. I do believe there was a recent change in the law on my husband's tribe where they now can do that. They can, particularly if it's on tribal land. That's the thing, is they can punish non-natives for crimes against natives if it happens on tribal lands. So it's ever changing, and it depends on what's going on with the U.S. government, and laws and arguing, and there's a lot of fighting going on, and there's protesting going on. And it's a very, very big mess. And the last video that I'm going to cover with this one, I think it's 22, it's talking about the land back movement, where natives are fighting to get their ancestral lands back. It starts off, oddly enough, in Canada, where they had a lot of land that was stolen, that the government had bought from a private person, but that the tribe had never actually legally given up. And they were going to build a housing development, and they did. We're going to stick around here, we're going to park a bus right here, and we're going to block all sorts of things. Eventually, the housing development had enough, and they're like, yeah, this isn't worth it. We're going away. But the government and the natives are still arguing about it. So there are still natives permanently living on that land. It's like, we need to figure this out. There's been a couple of other court cases where in the U.S. they've, he mentions one in New Mexico where they fought to have land back, and they were able to win and able to use their land. The Federal Forest Service runs it now, so the public can still use it. So I believe it's part of a state park, but the natives have right to their land. There was also a government case concerning the state of Oklahoma, particularly around Tulsa, where the natives won. So technically Tulsa, Oklahoma is native land. The main thing I think that changed is the native tribes can now deal with their own people on that land. So that's the main thing. I don't think they're charging rent. That would probably piss off a lot of people and push it a little too far. And that is something that a lot of tribal governments can in fact do. Speaking of charging rent, they can buy up, and they have money, they can in fact buy land, and then charge rent. Or if in my state there's a community college, there's a couple of other things on their land, and they charge rent. Or if there's a housing development, you don't own the land, you have like 100-year lease. So my sister ran into that when she was looking for homes, and she actually warned me and my now husband when we were doing that. It's like, no, don't buy there. Which of course, again, causes some issues because people don't necessarily want to build on tribal lands because they don't actually own the land, they're renting. So it's interesting how that, and again, it's going to vary by state and by tribe, and as in the first legal video, it's a tangled mess. But that is it for this review. We will be moving on to a couple other episodes for Crash Course, and that will be it for the videos for Native American history and Kaya's series. Obviously, there's still more books to cover. We will be, again, I'm filming this on the 16th, so I still have short stories and mysteries and a few other things that I'm going to be covering. I am doing Wednesday videos this year. So there is, in fact, more videos for me to film, but by the time you guys see this, this should be the last video for Kea and the last video in next video is the last video in January, nonetheless. And then we'll be moving on to Felicity and the War of, not the War of 1812, wrong girl, that's Caroline, but into the American Revolution. So I will see you next time. Thank you.